Be Frank Network. Content on this production is for entertainment and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice, nor is it intended to substitute medical treatment or diagnosis. Seek medical help if you believe that you are suffering from a mental illness or are a threat to yourself or others. By using any or all of the information provided, you do so at your own risk. Any application of the material is at the listener's discretion and is his or her sole responsibility.
Everybody, Doc Brian here, and welcome to Doc Talks, where we talk about people's troubles, trials, tribulations, and hopefully triumphs in life. Today with me, I have Mikel Brooks, who is the founder of We Are the 22 here in Arkansas, which is a veteran suicide. I call it a task force, basically, is what they do. And he is the founder of that. And today we're going to listen to his story and how all of that came about. Now, you were in what branch of service?
I actually was in the Army National Guard.
Okay.
I did a tour in Egypt at the beginning of the War on Terror for 6 months. I was an infantryman. I did a tour in Iraq in 0304 as an infantryman. I did Hurricane Katrina as an infantryman, and then I reclassed to a combat engineer, and I did a combat tour as that as well when I was wounded and retired. So.
Gotcha. So when you were wounded was in 2007. Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about that incident that caused you to be wounded?
Sure. So we were rolling down rolling down Route Tampa in Iraq, the main supply route, and hunting IEDs is what we did. I was in the point truck, and we took a massive 155 howitzer round. I think there was a couple off the side of the road. They detonated, and I actually took shrapnel on my left hip. As I was falling into the truck, I blew my right shoulder out. I stayed there for 2 weeks after that, and they were going to send me home. And I kind of finagled my way into staying and even going back out on mission 2 weeks later. And that was not a good idea because 5 miles out of the gate that night, I took another det. That one gave me a big brain injury, ripped my leg back open, and got me medevaced out of country. So,
Gotcha. So we've had Micah Briley, who's Donovan Briley's brother, tell his story, and then we have Jennifer Legate, who is, I'm going to go blank here, Patrick Kordsmeyer, his daughter, and in talking about how quickly people respond to let family know that there has been an accident or things like that. It seems like it's a hurry up and wait kind of ordeal.
Right.
How long did it take for your family to find out what happened?
Actually, when we got in on my first injury, we got into FOB Stryker and got into the cache. And right before they attempted to extract the shrapnel, which they couldn't do, it's still in there, they actually gave me a sat phone. And I was able to call my family and let them know I'd been wounded and was okay for the most part. And the second time, I was actually already in Germany before I got a chance. So that was pretty much immediate medevac. So.
Gotcha. So they medevaced you to Germany, and there's a hospital facility there. And what did they do exactly for you at that point?
So that was interesting. So at that time, it was 2007 in April, I believe. And at that time, I'd only ever heard of PTSD. I had no idea what a TBI was. And they actually gave me a CT scan, and the doctor pointed at me and he goes, "You have a TBI." And I go, "Well, what's that?" And he explained to me I had a traumatic brain injury that was highly visible in my frontal lobe.
Right.
And that has contributed to some of the struggles I've had in my life. It took me a long time to understand how much I'd changed because you don't realize it. You know, your people around you do, but you feel okay. You feel normal for the most part. You don't realize that you pick up sometimes, especially with frontal lobe, you pick up compulsive problems. You pick up personality issues. There's a whole range of things that it affects. So.
Sure. So a TBI, traumatic brain injury, essentially, in layman's terms, it's a bad concussion that actually damaged your brain.
Yes.
So where your brain is just kind of shook up in your skull. Now, do they relate that to the first accident that you were in, or do they even know when it happened?
Well, there's no way of knowing. I do know that second blast, I was bleeding out of my ears. So I was I probably got a good injury then, but I took I want to say 6 close range deaths my first tour and 13 my second tour. So actually had a couple trucks blown out from under me. So who knows really? I just know that now I have seizures. I control them with medication, but it stems from the brain injury.
Gotcha. Are they absent seizures where you just kind of space out, or you actually convulse?
Yeah. So if I don't take my medication, I'll have petit mal seizures, and then every now and then when I'm really stressed, I may have a grand mal. But on medication, I rarely have a breakthrough. So,
but it's non-epileptic
No.
seizures.
No.
Yeah, which come from TBIs.
Sure.
You know, there are different kinds. Now, I would note that there is a difference between having seizures and having like a vasovagal syncope that's due to a lot of stress and anxiety. And a lot of times the vagal response sometimes ends with just feigning and not knowing what happened. But in your case, it's an actual convulsive seizure.
Sure. Occasionally. Yeah. So those are normally breakthroughs when they are triggered by my stress. So, but I haven't had one in quite some time now. So
Gotcha. Now you remember this doctor saying you've got a TBI. What does that mean? Did he tell you anything like, well, this could affect this, and this, or was it just you've got a TBI?
No, he really didn't go into it. I'd just been wounded, and honestly, I remember that, but a lot of my time in Lunsdale is really vague. I was there for 2 weeks getting stabilized. They flew me to Fort Sam Houston. I spent 2 years there, retired in 09. During that time, I was actually put in the TBI research program when it was first stood up at the Center for the Intrepid down in Fort Sam. And so I was actually, and I'm still in that program. I will be for the rest of my life. Periodically, I have to get scans and tests done. And they take that information along with now thousands of other veterans, and they take that information and they'll study us for the rest of our lives in order to better treat future soldiers who get brain injuries. There wasn't a whole lot of information out there when I was first wounded. And but now today there's been quite leaps and strides in that area. So
sure, and we've come a long way in just a little bit of time when it comes to certain of diagnosis of whether it be a TBI or whether it be some kind of complex PTSD now as a subcategory. You were down there for 2 years in Fort Sam Houston. And then you medically retired. Is that what you said?
Yes. At that time, it was about after the first year, actually, they told me they're like with seizures and with the shrapnel in your hip and the scarring in my leg and everything. I can't run like I used to. I can walk, but you'll see me limp if I get real tired. But essentially, they were like, you can't be an infantryman, you can't be a combat engineer, so we're going to retire you out. And so it took them another year to do that. But I medically retired in May of 09. So,
and what rank did you retire?
Well, that's the whole thing. So down there, and this is an issue. I'd achieved a higher rank, but I got into trouble after the first year. They told me, like, your career is over with, you're done, and they wouldn't send me home. I kind of rebelled and got into some trouble. So I actually retired as an E1. But here's the thing: is that a lot of the rebellion and everything actually came from, in retrospect, and doctors have told me that a lot of that's also when my addiction problems kicked off. They had me on at that time 60 milligrams of Oxycontin a day, 3 milligrams of Xanax a day, and then 15 other prescriptions. And a lot of them, for everything from Seroquel, Depakote, you name it. And I was so out of my head from the TBI and the PTSD that I was suffering. But then you add all those other drugs to it. And I, like many other veterans, ended up going down a really dark path. And I was lucky that I was able to retain my benefits when I got out. I had a 2-star, General Gilman, actually, I remember. He actually, I have a valor decoration and Purple Heart decorated in multiple tours. And he actually saved me and was like, look, this guy just needs to go home and we're not going to, take everything from him. And so I was very lucky in that regard. A lot of guys weren't. So,
having TBI, the frontal cortex, which controls all kinds of things when it comes to our emotions, but it also controls some of our fine motor skills. Did you have any loss of fine motor?
I had speech issues.
Okay.
So that was my main thing. I actually had a stutter. I had to take speech pathology for about a year and learn how to slow down in my speaking to catch up to my thinking. There was like a disconnect there. And so that was it. I didn't really lose a lot of fine motor skills. I had the seizures and I had the speech issues, but they've kind of cleared up. If I'm really tired and I'm not thinking or being conscious about it, I'll stutter a little more. But I've really kind of got that under control now. It's been a long time, but that was the main thing that affected me.
Gotcha. So when you look back, the first time that you had some kind of, for lack of a better word, episode in respect to PTSD, can you kind of explain to me what that looked like, what that felt like to you?
So, I mean, I had immediate anger problems. And that was one thing that, looking back, that I didn't recognize that I was going through. And I would just, and like a light switch, just rage out. And I did that a lot. In fact, my own mother one time told me, being around me shortly after I was wounded, told me it was like being around a coiled spring. I was so tense. I was ready to fight at a moment's notice. And that was something that took a very long time to try to get under control. But I would say that everything was so hampered by the amount of medication I was on from the VA and from the military. It really, honestly, there's a gap in my memory really right through there. I mean, I remember kind of bits and pieces and highlights, but I was so medicated, like so many other soldiers at that time, that it's just like a blur. You know, I can't explain or even understand some of the things that I was doing back then because I was so medicated, you know?
Right. And that seems to be a problem, not just with soldiers, but in the civilian world, that we have people with mental health conditions, and whenever a symptom comes along, we just add another medication instead of trying to look at the root, which essentially what's supposed to happen is you have depression. Okay, it's bad enough you need an antidepressant, but you need to go therapy to find out why you're depressed.
Right.
Well, now you're depressed and you can't sleep, so now we're going to put you on a sleeping medicine, and then that causes something else. And I had a client one time that she came in and it was just like she wasn't there at all. And I looked at her med list and I'm going, I wouldn't be there at all either.
Right.
With that amount of medication. And I think with lack of mental health care, not just in the civilian world, but more importantly with our veterans, that there is such a shortage of mental health professionals that people just kind of get lost in the mix.
Right.
And they're just, okay, well, let's fix this temporarily by putting this Band-Aid on, which is a medication, but now you have another problem because of this medication.
That's right. And that's exactly what happened to me and so many other soldiers and veterans that I know and have known, was that we were so heavily medicated. We were on so many narcotics, like when I retired, that it easily flowed into something else, right? When they took my career, essentially, which was the way I viewed it. I understand I was wounded, but in my head, that's the way I viewed it. That's what I always wanted to do. And when that was gone, and then I was also unemployable by the government, I was 26 years old. I had 100% disability, Social Security, combat special comp, and I was sitting at home in Ball Knob, Arkansas. I went from jumping out of choppers, fighting in major battles, and I was back home, and it affected me profoundly. It affected my image of who I was inside. The way that I got out was something that I'm still not proud of, because I served honorably my whole career until then, and I wish I'd have done things different, but I also wish that there would have been more guidance on how to deal with what I was dealing with.
Sure. And so I guess in dealing with other soldiers and talking to them, you kind of lost your purpose, because here you were a soldier and now you're not.
Exactly.
You're just some civilian.
Sure. So even though I was National Guard, I spent, I think, 7 years on active duty. It was just constantly either deploying, coming back from deployment, training for deployment. Most of my time during that time was on active duty. So for all intents and purposes, I was an active duty soldier, and when that was gone, it really, I think that really fed into what happened next. I came home, I kind of got really, really depressed really fast, and I began abusing my medication, which was something that I didn't do too heavily while I was in. But when I got out, there was no limitations. You know what I mean? Like I was like, no, nobody's watching me anymore, or nobody cares. And I just kind of slid, and it was fast. I began intravenous use of my pain meds. Luckily, that lasted until, well, not luckily, but that lasted for a couple years. And I finally sought help for that at the VA. And while I was in the dual diagnosis program they had then, my father died 4 weeks in. And so that really kind of catapulted me into a whole nother level of addiction. It compounded the issues I was having, and it was just like a perfect storm. You know what I mean?
Right. And so just to explain to listeners of a dual diagnosis, what that is that there is some kind of addiction with a mental health issue.
Sure.
So you have, alcohol or drugs in addition to PTSD or bipolar or something of that nature, that they're not opposite or complementary of each other. Now, backing up where you were abusing your prescription meds, were they always your medicine, or did you get to the point of where you had to find somebody else's medicine to get?
So as is common with an opiate addiction, which is a horrible, horrible thing. It's terrible. After a while, you build up such a tolerance that even though I was getting still at that time 60 milligrams of Oxycontin, which is basically lab grade heroin in the mail, every month, 60 milligrams a day, I would burn through that probably in about 2.5 weeks at the height of my addiction. And then I had to search for it on the streets. And so that became dangerous. And it also affected my view of myself. And it just kind of fed into this cycle that I couldn't seem to break out of,
Yeah. And so in 2007, this would be now 2009, because you were in Texas for
2 years. I retired in 2009.
Okay. So in 2009, we really hadn't started the whole war on drugs
Nope.
at this point. And it was more of give them what they need to get by. And I think that in the medical world, there was this knowledge that it could be addictive, but how do you rate pain? How can you look on an image and say, yes, they have pain? If they're complaining, we need to give them something to make them comfortable.
What's terrible about that assumption is that as you become more addicted to the pain pills, your natural pain tolerance declines. And so what may not affect you if you weren't on those opiates is now almost unbearable. And it was a hard lesson to learn too, is that I thought I was hurting worse than I was. And it took me getting clean for actually a long time to realize that I wasn't in as much pain. I'm in pain, I have pain, but not as severe as my mind told me it was at one time,
Right. And so when you're on all these opioids, your brain actually starts sending pain signals in excess to these areas where you did have trauma, but it miscommunicates the level of pain or the severity of pain as a precursor to get more opioids in your system.
That's right.
And so your brain literally does work against you in your addiction, which then typically leads to other harder drugs. Did you experience that?
That's exactly what happened. So when my father passed, it was a horrible situation. I really respected and loved my father. He adopted me when I was 5. I was kind of abandoned when I was 3, and by blood, he was my great uncle. And him and my mom took me in when I was 5, adopted me. And, I was in the dual diagnosis program for 4 weeks, and they picked me up on a Friday and took me home for my first weekend pass, dropped me off. Actually, I think I drove my truck back Sunday night, and then he died Wednesday while I was in there. And obviously that was pretty traumatic. And I was good for about a year. I was helping to liquidate our farm, get the animals, rid of the animals and everything, because mom couldn't take care of them by herself, and working around the farm, helping her. And while I was doing that and I had that purpose, I was fine. I was clean. I was happy. I was doing better, to a degree. And then I'll be honest, that all got done and over with. And I found myself right back where I was at. I was essentially bored with my life, depressed again. And honestly, I began using methamphetamines probably in about 2012. And it was immediate, since I'd already had the experience with the opiates. It was an immediate intravenous addiction. And that got out of control rapidly. So I went from, I lost pretty much everything over the next several years. I ended up living out of my truck. Essentially, all of my money went to narcotics. I roamed around with the wrong crowd. I began getting in trouble here and there, and it just started this vicious cycle of addiction and depression and loss of self-worth that I'm lucky didn't kill me, to be honest. So at the height of it, I was abusing about a gram of methamphetamine a day, every day.
And what you said, kind of losing your purpose is one of the major things when we deal with depression or anxiety or anything, that when we kind of lose that identity as something that we are a National Guardsman and this is what I do, it's all I've ever done. And now I don't have an identity. I used to be respected, but now I'm not, and maybe it's not that we're not respected, but we see ourselves as being disrespected. And so one of the big things is structure. And, whether it's that you just have a to-do list for the day or you literally plan every minute of the day, when we get to those points, that's what we've got to do to find that purpose once again. And so, just like in your story, when all the work was done and you went home and didn't have anything to do again, you turned back to something to numb the pain, which really wasn't as painful as your brain perceived it to be.
Well, there was a lot of pain there. I began dealing with survivor's guilt. I had, guilt from when I got my valor decoration. I'm sure, as you know, you don't get those for playing patty cake on the battlefield. And, and on and on and on. The loss of my father, the guilt that I had of the way I was before he died. It took me a long time to realize that at least he was able to see me sober, before he passed. But at that time, all I could think about was like, I couldn't be there. I was an addict, and really that was it. And that was the next 5 years of my life. Just constant drug addiction, constant. I basically roamed around. I didn't stay in one place. I had major paranoia, from the methamphetamine. I went down to, and I'm a big guy, and I lost down to 100 and I think it was 65 or 70 pounds, which I look like a skeleton. And, and it was bad. Pretty much my entire family disowned me, which I don't blame them. They stopped talking to me. They didn't want me around. All of my military buddies didn't want me around, and I don't blame them either. And the hometown where I grew up, I was just kind of an outcast, and is what happens. And then I began to isolate on top of that. So in the end, and around February 27th, I guess the first time was around October of 2016. I had my first suicide attempt. I just gave up. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't see any way out of it. And what's ironic is that at that time, my mom was like, get involved. And she did talk to me on the phone occasionally. And she'd be like, you've got to get involved in a veterans organization. You've got to get out there and find something you believe in and do it, or this is all you're ever going to be, And she was like, you've got to get the help. And I didn't want to go back to the VA. I'll be honest, my dad dying while I was in there kind of was a dampener on me wanting to go to the VA. And even though it's not very rational, it's still, I associated that trauma with the VA,
Yeah.
Took me a long time to realize that. But yeah, so the first time I attempted, I actually, took a bunch of pills. I got a script. I took a bunch and I blacked out, and somebody found me, and I still don't know who it was, but I woke up 3 days later at Fort Roots, and they'd pumped my stomach, and I was angry about that. And honestly, it kind of made things worse. And so I went on from then until about February, and I was just miserable, and I hated myself. I hated my image of myself. I got to where I was kind of almost like feral. I wouldn't even look people in the eye. It was really strange, right? It's totally different from how I am now. But I was so beat down by everything, and I was so hopeless. And so finally what I did, it was I went to an abandoned house in Judsonia, Arkansas, that I know of or knew of. Had a fire in one room, and it was abandoned. And I'd been in there several times with other addicts, and I knew it was there. I knew it probably wouldn't be found. It's kind of off the beaten path. And so I went out there and I'd actually purchased heroin that day, which I didn't even do. To my credit, I guess, for what it's worth, after I cleaned up off the opiates, I never touched them again. I still have it to this day, but that day I figured that was the best way to do it. And so I bought some heroin and I went to that house, and it was probably about 4 in the afternoon. It was in the winter. It was late in the afternoon, and I went into that house and I sat on the floor and I thought for a minute about it. And then I decided that's what I wanted to do, was to take my life. And I figured out there that I would die before anybody found me. And so I mixed up a intravenous shot of heroin, and it was a lot, and I can assure you of that. And I injected it, and it hit me instantly. I knew pretty much the second the plunger stopped that I'd overdosed and that I was probably going to die. It was terrifying. The reaction was immediate. I was sweating. My vision was wavering. I threw up almost immediately. I couldn't really move. It pretty much incapacitated me almost immediately. I could see my phone over to my right, kind of on that floor, which was dirty, and I couldn't really reach it. And I was terrified. And I remember thinking very clearly that if somebody came through the door of that place right then, that I didn't really want to die, that I'd get help, and, doing the whole save me thing, but I knew nobody would come either. Nobody knew where I was at. And essentially I lost consciousness. And, I laid there about 23 hours, and while I was unconscious, I lost bowel control. And when I finally gained consciousness, I was literally partially frozen to the floor in my own excrement and vomit. And I had to pry myself off the floor. When I came around, I actually had a little bit of, this is really messed up, but I had a little bit of meth left. And almost out of reflex, I went to do it. And I actually mixed up a shot and actually started the needle and hit the vein, saw the flash, and sat there and stared at it for a while. I don't know how long, but I remember staring at it, the blood in the syringe. And I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore, and I can't explain it more than that. I had some strange experiences while I was unconscious that I can't really explain, but I do know that I stared at it, and then I just kind of pulled it out and set it down, and I got up and I walked out, and that was it. And as far as I know, that stuff's still there. I don't know if that house is, I don't go over there, but I would assume unless somebody got it, it's still there. And, but I left. And so what happened was I was just done. I was done with everything. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I was done with that, and I was done with all of that and my whole life to that point. And so for about 2 weeks, I stayed sober on my own, just was. And I'll tell you, at that time, I'd gotten so bad that my family had actually had a fiduciary placed on me through the VA. Mm-hmm. I was so bad, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They were trying to help me. But what was strange was that that was part of the reason why I killed myself too, because I was like, I can't even control my own life, like I'm worthless. And so when I decided I was clean all of a sudden, essentially, because I never went to get help, nobody knew about that either. I just was, I don't know how else to say it. I was just done. And so for 2 weeks, I kind of wandered around, and I was trying to tell people, hey, I'm done. But of course, they don't believe you. Why would they? Mm-hmm. You don't believe an addict, that quick. And I get it now, I understand. But at the time, I was just so disheartened, and I was fighting with the VA trying to get my income, because I wanted to try to get my life together. And they were like, well, this fiduciary is going to be on here for at least a year, before you can get that lifted, just period. And I was fighting with them. And so about 2 weeks to the day after that, I went to the Apple store of all places, and in Chenal. I actually drove to Little Rock to get my phone looked at. And I was in there and had my service dog at the time, and I was sitting at a table, and I wouldn't really look at anybody, like I told you. That was still going on. And I was so kind of like ashamed of myself or whatever. And a gentleman walked in named Larry Johnson in a nice suit. He sat across from me. And you understand, at this time, the scar on my arm right here, Those trade marks were still very red and inflamed, right? And he had no reason to talk to me. Looked kind of grungy, I know. And he sat across from me though, and started a conversation with me. That's what he does. And we talked for about 30 minutes, and we were both at that time complaining about the VA, you know, my fiduciary and whatever he was going through at the time. And so when they called my name, I got up to go, and he was like, "Hey, if they give you any more trouble, you know, call this number." And I was like, "Yeah, man, you know, a lot of people say a lot of things, and I didn't think about it, but it said French Hill. I had no idea who that was." And I put it in my pocket and did my phone thing, and I went home. Well, the very next day I was at the VA, and they were kind of jerking me around about this fiduciary again. You know, I wasn't getting any headway. I was getting more and more angry. Could not get access to the funds I needed to even get a place of my own or anything. And I was just kind of stranded. Nobody wanted to loan me money for sure. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know. I was just angry and I was upset. And I pulled that card out of my wallet, and I was like, you know what? I'm mad enough. I don't know who this is. I'm going to give him a call. Mm-hmm. And so when I did, you know, they were like, Congressman French Hill's office. And I was kind of shocked because I had no idea. And I was like, oh, hey, you know, Larry Johnson told me to call. And they go, oh, you know, Larry. And so they connected me to a really good friend of mine now named David Carnahan. And long story short, within about a month, he was able to get that fiduciary taken off my account. And from there, when I got the money that had been held in the fiduciary account back, I used that money to start W.A.T 22. But before that happened, actually got off the phone with them, and I looked at the other side of the card, and it was Larry's number. And I called him. I was like, sir, I don't know who you are, but I want to thank you. You just helped me. And he invited me over to his house right then. Again, did not have to do that, did not know me. And I went over there and began a very long friendship that goes on to this day. In fact, I'll probably go over there this afternoon. And but he asked me, and he was the first person to really ask me. He was like, because when I went over there that afternoon, I told him everything. I was like, you helped me and you didn't have to do that. And here's who I am. And I just want to be honest with you before you hear it somewhere else. And I've stuck by that this whole time too, by the way. And that's very important to do. And so, you know, and he goes, well, good, you're clean. What are you going to do now? And I was like, well, I don't know. He goes, well, what do you want to do? I go, well, you know, I mean, I don't know, I guess help people. I can't really work, you know. And he goes, have you ever thought about a 501c3? And I was like, no, I don't even know what that is. He goes, it's a nonprofit. Now, at that time, I'd never even been in an organization, you know, and so I had no idea what I was doing. But it started a spark in me, started me thinking. And he was like, what's affected you? And immediately I was like, well, suicide. It just changed my whole life. And so I had this idea in my head at first, and this is really how this all started. A lot of people don't know this. And I was going to combat the VA, right? And so that's what I was going to do. We were going to have protests around the country, and we were going to fight the VA. Well, I found out really quick after the June 4th rally we had at the Capitol that the VA will not work with you if you're protesting them. So, so first lesson learned. After that rally, I realized that even though we'd achieved some things with the VA, we'd at least got their attention, which was instrumental in later events. I actually looked at the suicide epidemic from a different perspective. And what I saw at that time, honestly, man, was a lot of walks, a lot of talks, a lot of fundraisers, a lot of awareness. But in my opinion, I didn't see anybody actually doing anything. Mm-hmm. And so the more I thought about that, kind of the angrier I got. And I was like, some of these guys just need somebody to care enough to be there. That's all it is. That's all I really needed, was somebody just to, help pull me out of where I was at and encourage me to go further. And so this really simple idea came to my head. Turned out to be not so simple, but simple at the time, that I was like, well, what if there's another veteran that's where I was at one time, was in that house, and they're not really wanting to die. They just want somebody to help them. I was like, what if we went and we helped them, period. And that started the We Are the 22 that is today. That idea it was a little spark, and it took hold. And so about July, of that same year, 2017, and you got to think, so I went from gram-a-day methamphetamine addict, and you can ask anybody, it's a well-known fact, February 17th of that year, to started the foundation in May of 17. And by July, we started suicide intervention operations. And the way we started that in the beginning was we put our number out there and we're just like, hey, if you're a veteran that's struggling in the state of Arkansas, give me a call. I will come to you. So we started that, and we actually had our first response not long after that. And we learned a lot from that response. At the end of that response, we had shots fired on the scene. We had law enforcement involved. It was a very intense response. But we learned a lot of the things that we do now from that response. So we started building what we have now. So over the next, I would say 7 months, I went on response after response after response. It was, and I traveled all over the state. I went anywhere, anytime. And slowly other veterans, started paying attention, and they were like, we can do that. I began having meetings with Little Rock PD, North Little Rock PD, MIMS, the VA, and I began learning what it was going to take to do this. And we began building a curriculum and a training and everything that we have now. But it was a process. You understand, at that time, there was no blueprint. There was nobody doing this. This literally came out of thin air and hard work. But the idea has never changed. And was that, one, nobody understands a veteran like a veteran. And two, you know, a veteran can't say you don't care if you're there at 2 a.m., right? Mm-hmm. Now, I remembered a few other things during that time. I did actually call the suicide hotline, which is a great resource. I'm not knocking it, but I think it was right before they had the state hotline. And I ended up getting a lady from Oregon, and we talked for a little bit. And then when we hung up, I was still sitting there by myself, you know, and that led to my suicide attempt. And so now when you call W.A.T 22, if you're a veteran in crisis in the state of Arkansas, and you call our hotline, then we'll activate a 2-man team of trained veterans. We'll send them into you. They'll sit down with you and talk and let you get your story out. They will do whatever it takes to get you through that crisis. Things that they're capable of doing that you can't do with the hotline is when they show up, they're able to assess, are your lights on? Do you have water? Are your kids fed? Do you have clothes on your back? You know, things like, you have heat in your house. If it's cold, do you have AC if it's hot, you know? And they can begin the process of addressing those issues, because what we found is a lot of times those they're not minor to the person in crisis, but those issues, the day-to-day issues, exasperate the other issues and lead to a crisis situation. And a lot of times, if you can alleviate those day-to-day issues, you can alleviate a lot of the other problems as well. So,
sure. And you know, when dealing with a veteran in crisis, which I have dealt with before, and we've worked together with one veteran, they can say to me, "You just don't understand," and I don't. You know, as a civilian who's never served in the military in any shape or form or fashion, I don't understand. I don't know what it's like to be in Afghanistan and see your friends die. I don't understand that survivor's guilt to that point. Right. And so it really is helpful, and I think imperative, that it is veteran-led, so that they see somebody who's been in their shoes.
So I'll tell you, and this is the beautiful irony of all this, is that the scar that's on my arm that I know that your listeners can't see, but it is there. Mm-hmm. The track marks is what it is from when I was an intravenous junkie. Ironically, that ugly scar that I was so ashamed of became my best tool in the beginning of all this, because when I would run across veterans, because I did in the beginning, they would meet me and they'd like, man, you don't understand. And I'd be like, bro, I'm Purple Heart valor-decorated. And I would point to that scar and I'd be like, there's nothing you can tell me, man. I've been homeless. I've been a junkie. I've been, you know, strung out. I've been lost, and I've attempted suicide, right? I do understand. And I believe that you can get through this, and I want to help you. And that alone persuaded more veterans when I was still responding regularly than anything else I could have said, right? It was that idea that okay, you've been there. and you can't deny that you've been there and you got out of it. So there's got to be a way out of here, you know?
Right. And while you said you don't knock any of the national or state suicide lines,
They're good assets.
yeah, I don't either. But the point is that you don't have to tell them who you are or where you're at. And so they're literally a counselor on the other end of the telephone that in many times this person has committed suicide while still on the phone.
Right.
They don't know where they're at.
Right.
They have no way of knowing. Or they don't know how to contact your family. When you hang up, you're still alone. You're still right where you were. And that's a huge detriment. But in your organization with We Are the 22, you don't leave them alone.
No,
you go to where they're at.
So we have a lot of things have changed since 2017. We now have capabilities that are pretty profound in what we do. One, we have an amazing team. I have, as of Saturday, over 70 active responders in the state of Arkansas.
Wow.
Yeah, that's huge. And we have amazing dispatchers. And for instance, though, if we have a veteran who's missing or who we're trying to get hold of that we think is an imminent threat of self-harm, we can now coordinate with law enforcement dispatches and actually ping their cell phones and find where they're at and go into them. Once you call us, we're coming to you, period, right? Mm-hmm. And so there is no getting out of that. That said, what we've learned is from our heavy social media presence that we have here in the state, like our Facebook, we've got about 36,000 followers on that, which is pretty awesome. Is that a lot of times, unlike the suicide hotlines, I can't give you a percentage, but it's off the top of my head, I'd say it had to be 70% of the callers or people that reach out to us are not the veteran. A lot of times, their mom, dad, brother, sister, buddy down the road, or old Army buddy that'll call us up because they've heard about our organization. And they'll be like, "Hey, Johnny's over here struggling. Can y'all go talk to him?" And we will. And so what that actually does is gives us this beautiful window of surprise where they don't know we're coming. And this has literally happened where we show up to a house in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas, and I've literally looked through a door or through a window pane on a front door and seen a kitchen light on and a guy sitting at the table, and you could clearly see a 45 and a bottle of whiskey on either side of him, and he was sitting there in between them. And we knocked on the door, and they'll come to the door, and you'll just be like, "Hey, man, I heard you're a veteran, heard you're struggling, and we just want to help. We're not law enforcement. We're not the VA. We're literally just veterans who care enough to be here and help you out." And a lot of times that alone will trigger an emotional response. They're so surprised to see somebody care that much to be there that you have this beautiful window of time to kind of make a connection and get them to trust you. Because they cannot, again, say you don't care because you're there and It's cold and it's 2 a.m. and you're an hour away from home. There's no way they can deny that you have their best interest in mind.
Right. And you don't know them.
No.
You don't know what they've been through, their problems. You don't, there's no way that they could say, "Well, you're going to judge me because you don't know."
Nope. And what we found is, and the other side of this that's really, really beautiful is that, we started doing this and we were only focused on the veterans we were responding to. We developed one of the most intense and I think in-depth suicide intervention programs in the country right now, to be honest with you. We consulted a lot of major agencies. We took all of that into consideration and built this awesome program. But what we've learned as the years have went on is how much we were helping the responders as well. Mm-hmm. We're taking guys like myself who maybe can't hold a regular job, who are disabled physically, or whatever, pretty much whatever the circumstances, and who maybe have been addicts, who have been homeless and have turned their lives around, and we're giving them a uniform, and we're giving them a purpose, and we're giving them a mission, and they're going out there and they're saving other veterans themselves. And there's no way that you can go on one of these responses and get that veteran into the VA or get a safe plan in place and go home at night. You might be exhausted. You might have been talking to them for 5 hours, but you know for a fact that you made a difference that day, and that's profound.
Yeah. And that's what we all need.
Yeah.
is that purpose and something to look forward to. How many times have you responded and it been too late?
Once. But when I say too late, what I mean by that is we have never thank God, responded on a completed suicide. Statistically, we know that will probably happen as we advance this, and we train our responders to be prepared for it, and we have protocols in place in case it does happen. But we have not yet. We have, though, responded after an overdose, to where the veteran was unconscious and the pill bottles were everywhere when we got there, and we were able to immediately activate the local ambulance service, get them to the hospital, and save their life. Our responders we are fully equipped with trauma kits, Narcan, and we actually wear subdued body armor underneath our polos because we don't want to appear tactical and we don't want to scare them, but we do have to be safe.
Sure.
We're going into volatile situations sometimes. But yes, so we are prepared in case of anything. So if we get there and they've already cut, we're able to render aid. We're able to stop the bleed, put a tourniquet on, call 911. If we get there and they've overdosed, we can hit them with the Narcan, bring them back until the ambulance gets there. We go in ready to save lives. That's what we do. So,
Gotcha. And so on average, how many responses do you make in a year?
So that varies, and we have a saying or an idea that if we don't get a response in a day, that's a good day. It means that somebody wasn't in a place they needed us. I can't really break down the numbers by year because they fluctuate, but I can tell you that since our inception, we've responded to over 430 Arkansas veterans in suicidal crisis.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, the instance that you and I worked together was a veteran who was a member of my church here, and he called and said, "I just want to let you know I'm going to kill myself." Right. And that's not typically a call you get.
No.
You know, you don't typically get those. Well, yeah. Well, as a preacher, you don't typically get
Yes,
those
sir.
kind of calls. And what I said to him was, "I don't want you to die alone. So let me get there and be with you when you do it." And that element of shock and care and concern left him to the point of where he agreed. What I have found in people who are suicidal is I've never had anybody who's attempted suicide that said they wanted to die. What they've always told me was there wasn't any other way.
Right.
And so it's that offering of hope that you give or that the responders give that really makes the ultimate difference. But there has to be that convincing factor that, yes, we're still going to be here to help you after we get you somewhere. How do you handle the follow-up to these crisis situations?
So what we do is generally we'll go in and we'll talk to the veteran. I will say that the majority of the time, we have found that the veteran just needs somebody to listen. They don't feel like they have anybody in their circle they can talk to, and
they're ashamed to tell.
Or they're ashamed. That's right. And so you come in as a complete stranger, and a lot of times they can open up and really get stuff off their chest. And we find that that is the case the majority of the times. A lot of times you can sit there for a couple hours, let them talk and get it all out and be a good ear for them, and they're going to be okay, right? And they'll at least. Maybe they'll be able to reassess their situation or whatever. Occasionally you get some that need to go in and get some help. And we're trained to identify that. We work very closely with the Central Arkansas VA healthcare system. They're amazing. We've worked a lot of cases together now. And so we'll help get them into, a program. Maybe they're addicted. They need to go do a dry out for 30 days or they need a PTSD program. We help and work with the VA to facilitate that for them in a smooth and timely manner. And that makes them feel like their problems matter and that somebody cares. Now, once our responders respond to a veteran, they are required to keep follow up at least every day, every other day. Some of them will do it every day. Some of them do it every other day for a period of time until, the veteran either requests that we don't call them, which does happen sometimes. We're fine with that. Or until we figure out a way to alleviate whatever problems that we found that they may have had. During that time, if we know their lights are out or we know they have an issue like that, they don't have food, we'll work with local churches and get a food drop done on their house. We'll work with the electric company, and try to get some relief relief on them, given the situation, whatever we can do. And generally, we'll call them again about 6 months later and just check on them. And a lot of times it's really cool to hear how much they've changed, and that encouragement that they get for those first couple weeks out of the crisis is pretty neat. It kind of it can really change their perspective, And so basically that's it. We just provide a voice that's there. We don't just dump them off the VA and that's it. We do have like a small time limit on it, or a required time. But if they need more conversation, we do that for sure. You know what I mean?
And so how many veterans have you assisted that now work with We Are the 22?
That's interesting. So off the top of my head, I would say about 15, but they are some of the best responders that we have. You know what I mean? I mean, all of our responders are amazing, don't get me wrong. But again, there's a special passion, special fire that you find in the guys who have been on the receiving end of a response, and now they're out doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah. You just really can't duplicate that. And that's what we like to see, is for a veteran to get help and get lined out and then turn around and do what we're doing, because that's going to be the key to make this work. We want to see this go around the country. We want to empower veterans to save each other. For too long, we've waited on the powers that be to save us, and we've relied on whatever government assistance or whatever is out there, but we believe that it comes down to us. We believe that this is something that should be grown, should be fostered, and we work on that every single day. That's what I do now, is try to grow this program, get the word out there, let veterans know we're here. Work with local law enforcement agencies, because that's the thing there too, is that the law enforcement agencies are realizing that we're an asset. We're a tool for them. If we're on a scene with law enforcement and they don't want to talk to the officer, they may talk to us. You know what I mean? We've even had officers allow us to transport them to the VA, and that's amazing. We love it when that happens, because now they're not getting put in a squad car. Right. They don't feel like their problems are getting them in trouble or whatever. They're able to get in a car with a couple of vets. We're able to joke and laugh, get them a hamburger on the way, and get them there and do a warm handoff with the Central Arkansas VA healthcare system. And that encourages them to, if they have a problem again, reach out for help. It's imperative that if a veteran reaches out for help, that they have a good experience with that help. Okay. Because if they don't, I guarantee you they won't reach out again. Right. Why would they? Right.
In the situation that you and I worked together on, if you recall, was in the middle of COVID, or at the very beginning of COVID, and you weren't allowed to respond.
No.
And I ended up taking him to the VA in Little Rock, and they turned him away because of his use of words. He said that he wanted to kill himself, not that he was going to kill himself. Yep. And which turned into an ordeal for you and for me. I was angry. You were processing on how to make this work. Right. You've been there before.
I've seen that before. Yeah.
Yeah. And so once we had him admitted, I allowed for the 72 hours, to kind of go by before I called. And when I called, they had not started him on any medication or any type of treatment. Is that typical for the VA?
So I will say that during COVID, things changed drastically. Okay. So what was going on during the initial part of that virus was not what was happening in 2019, right? 2019, they were on fire. They were doing amazing things. We were rolling vets in. They were getting them help. And I can't speak to, I do know that when the COVID protocols took place and everything, and we couldn't respond, we couldn't go in, it dampened our operations. You couldn't just put a guy directly into treatment. They had to quarantine for 2 weeks and isolate and everything. And
which is the worst thing if you're already suicidal.
Yeah, but I mean, what are you going to do? Like you can't deposit somebody from the outside into an inpatient program and get everybody sick and possibly die. That's a bad idea. I'll just speak to my own experience because I've been to 3K and I've been through all that myself. But generally, they would start trying to treat you immediately. I can't speak to why they may not have done it that time.
Well, I think it's important at least to point out in this story is that ultimately it was not a mental health condition. He had a brain tumor. And I think that a lot of times, and even with TBIs, we need to, as family, understand that they may be suicidal, but there may be a reason, medical reason why they're that way.
Absolutely, and a lot of times we do see that quite often where there's untreated issues. Perhaps they're not taking their medication for issues that already exist, and then they expound on each other and create a crisis. We do see that, and so what we try to do when we do those follow up calls is, did you take your meds today, man? Are you on your meds? We'll try, try to encourage them to do that and get on their medication. And just in my own experience, a lot of times, after a veteran's been out a while, it's not necessarily just the PTSD that drives them to a crisis. It's almost always a relationship, money, living situation, and not taking their medication for already diagnosed issues. Those are probably, in my experience, the four biggest factors. I mean, there's others obviously, but those are the ones you see pretty regularly. And so that's why we work closely with the VFW. We work closely with we'll work closely with anybody really if they want to help vets, and we try to serve our organization. We don't get into all this interorganizational rivalry that I think is detrimental to the overall cause. We've tried to position ourselves to be a catalyst to getting veterans help. We'll work with any organization, and in fact, even though we do love to bring in veterans to our work after we've helped them, we love to see that. But in our opinion, it doesn't matter what a veteran does after they've sought and received treatment. As long as they're getting involved with something and getting out in the community, like my mother told me originally, and it worked, right? Like she was right, which moms a lot of times are, was that I had to get involved. I had to find a purpose and I had to do it. Well, that's exactly what I've done, and it's changed my whole life. And we believe that for every veteran. So, we may work with them with one organization to get a bill paid or something, and then they may say, well, I have an interest in this. We may connect them to another organization that does that. Our only goal is to help that veteran, so we're not in competition with anyone.
So if you were a veteran and you were feeling depressed, no purpose, but not yet to a point of suicidal ideologies, where would you go to look for someplace to fit in, someplace to help? Because to me, you said a little earlier, there's a lot of groups that are advocating for this and a lot of groups that are raising money for this and talking about it, but there was nobody actually doing the work.
Right.
So in trying to isolate these people that may be headed that direction, maybe if your mom had said, you really need to get plugged into somewhere, and here's a list of things that you might like.
We actually have that. So we have a list of organizations, primarily Arkansas organizations, but we have a couple programs out of state with Mighty Oaks and a few others that we will try to steer a veteran to, especially if they don't want to go to the VA. I know that our friends with Sheepdog here in Arkansas, they've got a great program, Warrior's Path, they just set up. We're real excited about that. And what we'll do is we'll sit there and be talking to a veteran. If they're like, man, I don't want to go to the VA, but I'd kind of like some like a little bit, like some help, we'll tell them to go to Sheepdog. They've got a 7-day great PTSD program that it's called Warrior's Path that we're very excited about, and we'll try to steer them that way. We'll get a phone out and help them fill out the application, get it in, and whatever we can do to kind of fit their needs. But really, it's anything. It's really anything. The thing is almost without fail, when you're headed down that spiral into a crisis, you've isolated or you've drove away, let's say, the people that care about you. And a lot of times, you've got a problem to some degree, and you probably stop going out. You stop finding enjoyment in the things you used to like to do. So we'll be like, hey man, let's go kayaking. Let's go talk to this organization over there. They're having a picnic. Maybe you should go do that. It's in your hometown, just anything we can think of. But we do have a list of orgs that we consult with that if a veteran has certain things they like to do, that we can just be like, hey, let's give you a warm handoff to these guys over here we know, and let's get you doing that as fast as we can,
Sure. So what would happen if somebody called your organization who was not a veteran?
That does happen. And unfortunately, I've been asked through the course of doing this for the last 4 years, I've been asked, why don't you do this for everybody? One, logistically, I don't know how we would do it. financially, I don't know how we would do it. That would open you up to thousands of calls probably overnight. And although we want to help everybody, it's just not practically feasible. Occasionally, rarely, we have somebody, because we're pretty clear that we're veterans, but occasionally we have somebody that'll call in. And what we do in those regards is we try to coach whoever calls us, because normally not the person in crisis, it's probably a family member or something that's concerned. And we'll encourage them, are they getting mental health care? And generally that answer is no. And we'll say, well, we have some therapists and some counselors that we work with that are civilians. Perhaps you could work out a deal with them and get them some help. We recommend Bridgeway when it's really bad. But a lot of times it's just getting into therapy, getting into counseling. That's so important for your mental health. And generally when people say something, they're not in any of that. So, we try to encourage them to do that. But there's not much we can do. And I'll be honest, I joined the military when I was 17, and all of my healthcare has been military and veteran related. So I'm not even really up on what's available and out there for civilians, So generally it's just, we just tell them to try to get some therapy and things like that. The model that we're built on is that peer-to-peer, and we don't have that with regular civilians, so it's kind of a dampener. And as far as I know, there isn't an operation like this for civilians. So,
right. Well, I'm certainly glad that you use this crisis for good. It would have been very easy for someone to just decide that I'm going to continue to isolate or even attempt suicide again after a little bit of treatment. But it's those times that when we take the bad and turn it into good that we find purpose again.
Yep. You're absolutely right. And if you'd asked me 4 years ago if I thought I'd be where I'm at now, there's no way. I couldn't see the me today. And I think that that's so important to tell people who are out there struggling right now, is that, right now it may look dark and it may look hopeless, but I truly and firmly believe that anybody can change. The trick is that eventually your desire to change has to become greater than your desire to stay the same. And it sounds so simple when you say it, but it's the truth. You have to want to change more than you want that next hit or that next shot or whatever it may be. It's been a wild ride. We've accomplished a lot of things. We've helped a lot of veterans, and we're not stopping. And we're only getting better. We're enhancing and growing our operations. We are doing everything we can to make this a very robust and effective program. So very proud of it and very proud of my people.
Well, I, for one, am thankful for you and for your organization. And I'm just happy to see that there is resources available for our veterans. Michael, tell us where our listeners can find more information about We Are the 22.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, we have our website. It's at wearethe22.org, just like it sounds. And if you go there, you can see a little bit about our operations. We also have our Facebook page at We Are the 22. And then here's the most importantly, we have our hotline. And so right now, if there is a veteran in the state or that's struggling, or if you know of a veteran out there that's struggling, you can call our hotline anytime, day or night. It's manned 24 hours a day. We will pick up. And that number is 1-855-932-7384. That's 1-855-932-7384. And if you can't remember that and you're in a hurry, if you'll dial 1-855 We Are the 22, it will ring through. I know that's too many digits, but it'll ring through. So, but that's just an easy way to remember. And we will get some help out to you. You don't have to do this alone. And so, yeah.
Great. Of course, we'll have all of that in the description of this podcast. And so I appreciate you once again being with us here today and sharing your story.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doc.
All right. I'm Doc Bryan. You can find me at thedocbryan.com. All of my social media links are at the bottom of that website. Also, Doc Talks is a part of the Be Frank Network. You can find all of our podcasts at befranknetwork.com. Michael, keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate your work.
Thank you, Doc.
All right. Everybody have a good day.